All right, we are back and we've survived our first written assignment. Although it was a little rough for a couple of people because they actually did shoot a video with their answer, but that's okay. We're going to try to keep the video on the YouTube just for the formal speeches and informal speeches. But it was kind of funny. So that was cool. Now, in reflecting back on the assignment, um, a lot of people, I guess, didn't really understand what it was I was looking for. And a big reason for that is something you've got to be careful of. Now, this is something that some of my communication colleagues and I have gone over for many years. And that's the fact that if you don't read directions, see, that's part of communication. If you're given written information and you don't pay attention to it right. So for many of you, when I gave you a response, I just gave you like, I got it, good job, or very good. And a big reason for that is because in the first part of last night's written assignment, you were supposed to point out the three examples of external noise or physical noise that was in the scenario with Billy and his mom. And for some reason, many of you came up with an external, a physiological, and a psychological, which I couldn't understand why, because you wrote out first what I asked for, and then you put all this other stuff. That's all right. I mean, it happens. But just be careful in the future, because I know there are some professors, especially if you're a communication major, who, if you don't follow the directions right, they will nail you big time. Anyway, uh, believe it or not, of all of you who did hand back in, your assignment, only two people actually nailed it correctly. Remember, anything that disrupts the sharing of meaning is considered noise or interference. So in the scenario with Billy, the number one and of course most glaring example of external noise was the music, of course. I mean, come on, guys. When you were 14 years old, you knew when garbage night was. Go take out the garbage first before you go up and you play your horrible 90s music, right? So, of course, the music was the first type. But the second type was, of course, a closed door. Okay? A closed door is an example of external noise, anything that disrupts the sharing of meaning. Okay? As a matter of fact, I love watching people as they try to talk to somebody through a door, and they'll come up to the door and they'll be like, hey, listen, I got to tell you something. And they'll faintly hear from the other side, I can't hear you. I says I got to talk to you about something. What they do is they go up to the keyhole as if that keyhole is going to transmit that message clearly. All right? Absolutely. A closed door is definitely an example of external noise. But now the third, and I guess for me, the most obvious one, which only two people seem to get, or a couple of people got it. It's just only two people got all three of them. Because for me, it's the most glaring example because I've seen it so many times in my life. And that, of course, is the physical distance where one person's on the first floor and one person's on the second floor of the house. Let me ask you something. Have you seen a recent conversation in your home where one person's on the second floor, the other person's on the first floor? Have you ever seen any of those conversations go smoothly? Or what's the single most common word in that conversation? What? What? And that's my favorite part, is that somehow, somewhere, we were taught that if you're in that conversation, if you take the word what and you stretch it out, that helps. Which, of course, it never does. But people, what? Unbelievable. So, it was the music, the shut or closed door, and, of course, the physical distance. Now, the second part of the assignment, everybody had some really good examples here of in your own life where there's been external noise or psychological noise or especially physiological noise. People mention the flu or being really sick and that kind of thing. But one of my favorites when you talk about physiological, one of my favorites is, and I point this out if we were in a face-to-face class, and I'm sure some of you would be sitting in one of our classrooms, especially as there were an hour and 45 minutes if we were face to face, you'd be having one of those like 64-ounce mochiatas from Dunkin' Donuts that we have on main campus. And usually by the end of the class, you're pretty much done with that mochiata. But guess what you're doing as soon as I dismiss you from class? You're going to be heading to the men or ladies' room. Well, as you head out the door, who happens to be in the hallway? Hey! I didn't know you were going to Bergen too. I haven't seen you since we graduated high school. How you doing? And of course, they want to talk with you and they want to converse with you. And of course, what are you doing? You're like, oh yeah, I haven't seen you since graduation. And of course, you really got to go. That mochiata is really starting to kick in. And no matter what that person says to you, no matter who they else say, hey, remember such as I saw them the other day, and you still see it ain't gonna matter. Whatever they say is not going to transmit or to be registered by you because your body's telling you bathroom, bathroom, bathroom. And of course, you just want to get going. Or my favorite is when you ever talk to someone and they have to go, they're just like, hey, yeah, no, we'll talk. Yeah, absolutely, we'll talk. And of course, they're never going to talk to you. They're just backing away because they got to go. And their body's telling you bathroom, bathroom, bathroom. Or I'll give you another example. You want to talk about physiological. I would love to have seen my Com-100-103, the 1/3 of you watching this who are in that class, because you guys go from 10:15 to 12 noon. And I wouldn't normally go all the way till 12 noon, but sometimes I would. And of course, many of you would either have a class before this one, or you just, like a lot of young people, forget to eat breakfast. So now 11:35, 11:40 a.m. is rolling around, and what starts to occur? Feed me, I'm starving. And when you are hungry and you are starving, there's nothing that somebody's saying to you is being registered clearly because all you're like is, I'm starving. So that's all noise. And there were some really good stories that you guys provided about your experiences with the 3 different type of noises. All right. It's now time to move on to our little bit here of Chapter 2. And of course, I like that you read over the chapters. You don't have to read through them word for word, but that you read over them. And we would have done an exercise in class based on one particular term that is mentioned in Chapter 2. And it's one that I always feel is important because it really has a lot to do with not only how we initiate communication, but how we respond to people who communicate with us. And that key term they talk about in Chapter 2 is perception. See, perception is based on what we feel we know to be true, or to be right, or to be correct. Okay? And it, based on what we perceive, or what we feel we know to be true, will then determine either how we communicate with people, or how they respond back to us. And although there are a lot of different factors that form our perception, a lot of different factors that go into forming what we perceive, what we feel to be know to be true, the most overwhelming factor that forms our perception is our own experiences. Is we will always base on our own experience what we feel we know to be true, and then again that determines either how we communicate or how people or how we respond to people who've communicated with us. And what that does is because we rely so heavily on our own experiences, we'll tend to make perceptual errors. Okay? And probably the most significant and glaring perceptual error is when we tend to generalize about people without regard to unique characteristics. Now, some of you already know, but what I've just given you the definition for is the term stereotyping. Okay? We will tend to stereotype people. Okay? And it could be on who knows what. We will stereotype people. And again, it's based primarily on our own experiences. We'll stereotype people based on the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their cultural background, their religious beliefs. Hell, we even do it based on geography. You're from West Virginia, you must be married to your sister. Okay? We'll tend to do things like that. But there's a lot of different ways that we go ahead and make these perceptual errors and we stereotype people. Okay. Let me give you a couple quick examples relating to your assignment. Let's go back about 21 years and about 45 pounds ago. I'm a brand new faculty member at Bergen. And this was back in 1999, so we didn't have smart classrooms. So if you wanted to show a film in class, you had to get a TV and a VCR. I don't know if you know your history classes very well, but a VCR, it's a videotape we used to, anyway. So I had to go down to the media center and get a TV and a VCR. So now there's a gentleman down there. He's never seen me before. And he looks at me and says, "You're faculty, right?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." I pulled out my brand new faculty ID card. So I go ahead and I take the TV VCR. I come back a couple hours later. Well, now he knows I'm a faculty member. So based on what he sees, this is based on his own experience, he just says to me as I'm rolling this cart with the TV and VCR back into the media room, he says, "So, what do you teach, phys ed?" And I got angry. And I looked at him and I said, "No!" And I stormed out. Now, the reason why I did that is I felt he just purposely stereotyped me. That if I was built or looked a certain way, the only thing I'd be smart enough to teach would be phys ed. But then I later started to think about it, and I thought, well, based on his experiences, okay, based on what he has known, his, like middle school or elementary school, middle school, high school, the gym teachers used to look one way and the chemistry or English professors or teachers would look another way. Even here at Bergen, you look at some of our biology or chemistry professors, they look like chemistry professors. And yet, when you look at our wellness and exercise science department, we got people in their early 60s and they're going out for lunch. You know what they do for lunch? They go run 5 miles. We've even got Julie, one of my close friends on campus, because she's part of our veterans committee. Julie, Professor Julie Sita, just recently competed in her first triathlon. Okay, so based on that, I felt, well, maybe he didn't purposely stereotype me. He just was generalizing based on what he saw. It was based on his own experiences. And when I finally realized that, I wanted to go apologize to him, but he got fired 2 weeks later. But anyway, so that's a case where I was stereotyped. But now there was also a time where I stereotyped somebody, and it was kind of comical because I didn't see this coming. But some of you may know, I know some of you were in diapers back then, but a few years ago, and when I say a few years ago, I'm talking about 15, 16 years ago, the most popular and most talked about television show in America was a show called The Sopranos. All right. Now, most of you know the show I'm talking about. For those who don't, there was a TV show produced by HBO, and it was about a New Jersey mafia family. As a matter of fact, a couple of scenes were shot at the campus of Bergen Community College. Scenes from the very first episode were shot just down the street from Bergen on Paramus Road in Paramus at one of the office buildings. So, it was a very popular show. God, it had record ratings for HBO. As a matter of fact, it had the highest rated show on HBO until the final episode of Game of Thrones. I mean, it was just so popular. And it was popular among a certain members of our North Bergen community, Bergen County community. And that, of course, Italian Americans. So I had some students in class, and we were doing an exercise about cultures and stuff, and he said he was Italian. He's from Belleville or somewhere else in Essex County, something like that. And I just quickly said to him, "Oh, so you must love The Sopranos." And he looked at me and he said, "No, as a matter of fact, I don't." And he then went into, he and his family were part of this group, and I remember hearing about this on the news. There was a group that was so appalled by the negative stereotype of Italian Americans that were being produced by the show The Sopranos, that they actually fought and won in court certain areas of Essex County where HBO wasn't allowed to film episodes of The Sopranos. So here I was thinking, oh, this Italian guy, he's from Essex County. He must love The Sopranos. Yeah, Godfrey, Tony. No, he hated it. So here I had stereotyped somebody, and it kind of nipped me in the bud there. So as you can see, from your assignment for Chapter 2. I want you to read over perception and stereotyping. I then want you to give me an example of when you stereotyped someone, and then when you were stereotyped by someone else. All right? So that's going to be part 1. That's going to cover Chapter 2. I'm now going to go and shoot a separate video for your next assignment.